And joining us now from Montreal is Nicholas Salter. Welcome to the CJN Daily.
Great to be here.
Well, it's good to have you. Good to meet you as we are a couple of days out from the official passing of the legislation, Bill 96, by the Quebec National Assembly. 2 or 3 days have gone by. How is it still resonating with people like yourself who are in the Anglo Montreal or Quebec community?
Yes, I mean, the bill just passed a few days ago, and there's been, I think a continued anxiety and worry on behalf of the English-speaking community as it relates to the impact of the bill, right? There was a lot of analysis that happened prior to the bill's adoption, kind of trying to predict what would happen. And obviously, bills are living things in some ways, right? It comes down to their implementation, how they're operationalized. And I think there are a lot of questions that remain. How will the bill be implemented, and what are the impacts on the English-speaking community? We saw a rally yesterday demonstrating again that there's continued anxiety in the community.
Well, is it anxiety, or is it fear, or is it anger, or a little bit of all of it?
You probably would say there's probably a spectrum there where there's a mix of anxiety, fear, anger, frustration. Bill 96 is an update of Bill 101. A lot has changed since the introduction of Bill 101. English speakers in Quebec have actually become increasingly bilingual, so are adopting the French language more and more. English speaking bilingualism was about 37% in 1971, and it's now gone up to 68.8% in 2016. So we're seeing more and more English speakers embrace the French language. In fact, a lot of the English speakers who've remained in Montreal throughout the years do see the importance of protecting the French language. And unfortunately, Bill 96, the way it was introduced and the consultations and the various discussions around it didn't include the English-speaking community in part of the discussion, didn't reach a consensus on how to advance protecting the French, but also make sure that the concerns and worries of the English-speaking community were addressed.
So before we get into the specifics of the actual economic and job prospects for Anglo and Allophone Quebecers, are people saying that's it? I'm moving and I'm never coming home because this province is getting to be untenable for English speaking or immigrants from non-Franco countries? Like, what are people saying?
I've heard some of those similar fears or plans being raised. I don't think we've seen any concrete evidence of that happening yet. Again, it's fairly early days. We're a research and policy organization, so we focus a lot on evidence and data. So I don't want to predict that people are going to leave until I actually start to see the trends, see some numbers that are indicating that that's happening. But I think there is again a lot of concern in the English-speaking community. On our end, when it comes to employment, we know English speakers face a lot of employment challenges. If people aren't able to earn a livelihood or in fact thrive in their careers, then they often end up moving somewhere else to do so.
Well, let's dig into what you just brought up, because that was one of your policy papers that came out before the bill was brought in, right? The disparity in terms of jobs and salary or between people who are English speaking. Those, could you just tell us a little bit about what you found and why it's so concerning?
In that report, we found that overall at the provincial level, English speakers have a 2% higher unemployment rate than Francophones. And we also found that median incomes were lower than about $2,800. And what this indicates is that English speakers are struggling to fit into Quebec's labor market. Yeah, it's all the more surprising when we do see that education levels for Francophones and Anglophones or English speakers in Quebec are about the same. So we would expect them to perform fairly at the same levels in the labor market, and we're not seeing that. So it's a worrying trend. And in fact, the trend on unemployment goes back almost 2 decades, and we start to dig deeper into the data, and it has been widening to the point that it's at today. As well, the median income gap has been widening as well for about the last decade. So these are ongoing trends that are getting worse over time, and we're worried that unfortunately Bill 96 will make those trends get even worse.
Well, part of the issue, which I understand is something that's your concerns, are because of the quality or the accessibility to French language and language training, FSL. What is the problem of accessing it for people who may not be able, they get shut out because they can't speak French, but then how do they learn to speak French, right? It's sort of a catch-22.
It's very difficult to actually find programs, right? We had a dedicated team searching for programs, professionals, right, who were well equipped to try to search for these things, and it was difficult for them to do so. So finding these programs is difficult. When you find them, then there's the question of accessibility. Can I make this happen? What time is the program? You know, can I arrange daycare? Do I have to travel? If you're in a region of Quebec, and there are English-speaking communities across the province, right? It's really important to remember that there's over 1 million English speakers in Quebec, and you know, just less than half of them are spread out across the province, right? The rest are in Montreal. So regional access was an issue. And then there's eligibility, right? So even when you're finding a program, you decide I can access this thing, I can make this happen, it's possible for me to fit this into my life, then often you'd find perhaps that you weren't eligible because eligibility is typically restricted to actually immigrants. So if you're a migrant from the rest of Canada, you've come from another province, or if you grew up here and say graduated 10, 20 years ago, or just want to improve your French, or realizing that your French language skills are a barrier for you to advance in your career. Or even if you wanted to change careers, right? Our economy right now, it's fairly clear that there are some key industries that need to develop, particularly the green transition, which will require our workers in our labor market to reskill themselves. So reskilling is really important, and English speakers need to have the ability to do that, and that may entail learning a whole new professional vocabulary. And so those kind of programs that might, if you didn't have a basic French language skill, might equip them with that professional vocabulary, those don't exist as well. So we were quite dismayed to find that, and we strongly believe that the government needs to invest in providing these opportunities for English speakers and developing a robust network of French language training programs.
Now, I know Mitch Garber and other business leaders in Quebec who speak beautiful French, have said we need to be open to international business. How are you going to handicap your own provincial employees because they won't be able to communicate with the outside world, or even the ROC, rest of Canada? Talk about that part of this law and why that's so concerning for your organization.
Businesses, organizations now need to justify in their hiring, in their job postings, that justify the use of English, right? So if they want to hire an employee and say, I'd like to have English as a skill, they need to be able to justify why and say, I'm an international business, I need to communicate with the world, or provide others some sort of compelling reason to explain why they're hiring an English speaker. And this will have potential ripple effects as well on English speaking employment.
This sounds like the old days for people in my generation, right? But you never lived those days. So, how does this feel for you to feel this coercive and punitive, as you called it, law?
The bill itself ignores, the efforts made by the English-speaking community in trying to improve their French and make a contribution to Quebec's economy. And so, again, when it comes to employment, that's what we're worried about, is the impact on people and their jobs and their ability to maintain their jobs or advance in their careers.
But you also said something that having an English skill would be sort of the secret sauce, the secret weapon. And now they have to justify why they even would be allowed to hire someone who has that skill. It doesn't seem to make any sense on a global business scale to me.
I think the government, wanted to protect French, and I think that's actually a meaningful goal. But again, I think they could have done it more incentive and positive ways. When we think about, exactly, the need for Quebec's economy and to be part of the global economy, to be connected. You can again think of English speakers as people who could really be helpful in various businesses and organizations. When we talk about healthcare and social services as well, and that was something you hadn't touched on that much, there was clarification from the government that those wouldn't be touched, right? And there would be, people will continue to have access to services in healthcare in English. But one of the concerns we have as it relates to the employment angle, right, is that if you haven't created an infrastructure for English speakers to learn French, to be part of that system, you haven't created, like, another thing, professional orders, right? You have to pass a professional orders test. And the training, our team has also looked at that. It's in a forthcoming report. We've looked at the training opportunities for people to join a professional order, which is a very specific vocabulary. But if they have the professional skills, education, for example, nurses, engineers, social workers, if they have the education, right, but they have to pass a French test there should be programs in place to help them do that and accompany them, and that would be a net benefit to Quebec's economy. So in the absence of that, again, we're worried that those health and social services will be maybe less English workers to provide English services, right? And that will have an impact over time as well.
And we already saw during the pandemic how there were no nurses. They have to beg people to work and not get vaccinated because they didn't care about their language skills. They didn't even have the bodies, right?
Well, this is why, when Quebec's facing a labor shortage, we think it's incredibly important that English speakers are not left on the sidelines. And what we've heard from the community through our consultations is they want to be part of Quebec's economy. They want to contribute. People want to learn French. We did a survey of English speakers looking at their needs, and 67% of us told 60% of them told us, French language skills are a barrier to me to enter the workplace or advance, and I want to improve them. But again, with the bill, we see the promise of building an infrastructure, but that infrastructure hasn't been built. And
I wanted to just go back to your you said coercive measures and punitive measures. What would those look like? Can you give us some examples of what you've heard will be in the bill?
Well, you can interpret those things in a few ways. We think of individuals, right? And we actually think it's somewhat punitive to introduce a bill that restricts access to services for individuals without providing the opportunity to learn French. So that's the impact on individuals. On businesses, there's a series of measures. It's mostly related to fines and those amounts have increased. And that those fines are actually happen on a daily basis. There's sort of a violation of the Charter of the French language, and so the bill introduces those measures in quite a serious way.
It could put a business that has less than 50 employees out of business if they, have a bookkeeper that doesn't have the language. What are they going to do?
Well, this is the challenge, right? Is that businesses will have to figure out how to adapt, and there are costs involved, and the question of who pays for the training, or how do businesses adapt? That's quite unclear at this point. Again, they have this promise of France Quebec of building this network of language training programs to help businesses and individuals adapt, but that hasn't been built yet. So at least for the time being, a lot of those costs will be bared by the businesses themselves.
When does all this take effect? Right away, immediately?
The implementation of it will take some time. And again, some clauses come in right away, and some clauses there are delays that differs for individuals and businesses. But it's quite a complicated bill. So predicting its impact and how quickly it will be implemented is hard to say at this point. But obviously, it's a difficult and tough time for English speakers in Quebec.
Thank you very much for this breakdown of what's going on at the moment as the bill was passed. And I'm sure we'll be speaking again in the coming days. From Montreal, Nick Salter from Montreal. Thanks for being on the CJN Daily.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to talk about our research.